So welcome. Today I have a special guest. Her name is Randall, Kanna. I found her on Twitter and I'm glad that I did. You know, it's fun because I'm always promoting people like, hey, do your own thing, achieve your dream of working for yourself. And then I found Randall talking about getting a high-paying job in tech, which I'm 100% in favor because what we're doing right now is because of people working for great tech companies. So welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great. Just thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
You know, I remember when I approached you, like, "Hey, let's do this podcast," and you were like really happy, and then I said, like, "I'm also happy because you are a published author in the O'Reilly Media. O'Reilly Media sells books for programmers and for the tech world, and I was in the tech world for around 10 years, and I read a couple of books. So to me, it's a pleasure to have you here because it's not every day that I can meet a published author in a big, really, really big and important company such as O'Reilly. So I wanted to thank you for saying yes to this call.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's just such an honor. And thank you for also mentioning that about the book. That was really unexpected. Last year, everything kind of just blew up for me. And then I had two big publishers reach out about book deals.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, how does this happen? So everything kind of came together.
And what's that book that you wrote for O'Reilly about?
O'Reilly, well, the book was all about smart contract development and getting into blockchain. So everything you need to know from if you're an engineer and you really want to start building on the blockchain, it's all about smart contracts, Ethereum, and how you can go from basically 0 to 60 and start building right away. So something I was really proud about because I had only gotten into it, I think maybe 6-9 months before and started teaching myself and had working in it. I had been studying it for a while, obviously. And then that came together and I started speaking at conferences about it and helping people get jobs and teaching workshops. And I actually ended up quitting my big public tech company job just to go into blockchain.
And now you're working for a startup that is building apps for to modernize, let's say, the executive assistant. Would you talk to me about that? It's called Based HQ.
Yeah, I'm really proud of what we're doing at Base HQ. We're trying to help executive assistants in their careers and to do better and to also help support their executives better. So it's a really important mission to us. And we have some amazing, both female co-founders, which, we're kind of, you don't hear of that very often in the tech industry. And they're just really committed and they've founded companies before that were really successful. And we're just kind of trying to give them tools to help them do their job better.
Nice. And I'm glad that you're talking a lot about jobs because I found you on Twitter because I saw you talking a lot about how to get a job in tech, specifically a good job, a job that you might find very attractive and a job that you will end up loving. So, which is like something I don't even talk about on my side of what I talk about on Twitter. But still, I worked in tech for 10 years and it's something that's very close to my heart because again, if it weren't for tech, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So tell me what got you into teaching people how to get jobs. And after we're done with that, let's talk about how to get a job. But first, how did you get into that?
That's a great question. So 6 years ago, almost 6 years ago in a week, I started applying to boot camps. I had graduated college and I felt really lost about what I wanted to do. And the degree that I had was basically useless when I graduated. And
You're not alone there. Don't worry.
Yeah. But nobody was reaching out to me. I couldn't get any job interviews. I had no offers. I was running out of runway because, I graduated college and had no job. And so after that, my aunt had kind of sent me an email and she was like, you need to look up this thing about coding boot camps. And I was like, a coding boot camp? What even is that? It sounds very odd. And I was very skeptical. But I started looking into it and I spent months researching, what they were and what the good ones were and if people were actually getting tech jobs. And, 6 years ago, boot camps, it was highly saturated, but it was still early days where there were some very well-respected boot camps. So I got into one, and I prepped myself for about 6 months, which was probably overkill in retrospect. And then I attended the boot camp, and I graduated and learned a lot of great stuff there, and also worked really hard, weekends, nights. And once I graduated, I got a job in 2 weeks, and it was hard work.
Good.
Yeah, it was a lot of hard work and a lot of luck at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, I worked as an engineer for a few years, and I was junior, and then became a senior engineer within 2 years. And I kind of just enjoyed that for a while, working in tech. I love to code, and that's kind of just something I'm mostly focused on the last few years. And about a year ago, I kind of wanted to start giving back, because I realized there were so many people that helped me early in my career. And if they hadn't have helped me, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I realized I wasn't really contributing to the community, and I wanted to help people. And then I just started reaching out to people, doing whatever I could. And it felt so good to help people and see them get success from that I started wanting to do it more. And actually all kind of started because I helped out my youngest sister, and she's an engineer now. And we kind of, we talked about it all the time. We had paired like a few times, and she saw my success and how happy I was. So she's actually an engineer now too, and she's very successful. So it was a really great
helped
feeling.
her get the job too?
No, she is a self-starter. She got the job.
Oh, okay.
I just provided advice as much as I could, and books.
Yeah, and she took whatever she wanted to take. Sisters and brothers, they just do whatever the hell they want. That said, so you found that people were in need of that, let's say, information about getting jobs, because it's, man, I've known so many high quality people, let's call it like that when they go to an interview, they just crumble from the pressure. These are also usually the people that go to a test and also are trembling because they just fear messing up. And so you saw that necessity, and you wanted to give back to your community, which is something that I've noticed that happens a lot in tech, specifically in the open source domain, that people just want to give back, just want to provide free value and help others and just grow the community.
Love that.
Yeah, that's something that's not normal in other communities. So it's something and it's weird to me, but it's actually like refreshing to see it. Even though it's not new, open source is not new, it's still refreshing to see how people just want to help others, most of the times without even expecting something back. So I'm glad that you actually wanted to give something back to the community, and you started like teaching people how to get jobs, and specifically in the tech world, which it's like very, well, it feels saturated. I don't think it's as saturated as we think, but still people are struggling to get those jobs. So let's talk specifically about that. So let's imagine that you are coaching me in getting a job, and I'm like someone who just recently graduated from college. I've been struggling for the last 6 to 12 months trying to find the perfect job in tech. I'm about to drop everything and just, I don't know, live with my parents forever because I cannot find a way to get a job. What would you say to someone in that situation? How can someone get started?
That's really hard. I've been there. Even when you've been in tech for a year or two. After I had my first job for a year as an engineer, I kind of had started looking around. And even if you have a little bit of job experience, it's hard to get a job. But as soon as you hit that 1 year mark, 1.5 year mark, it's suddenly companies are a lot more receptive to getting emails back. So it's really all about staying in the game and staying focused on getting a job until you make that happen. And as hard as that is, and it definitely is, it seems insurmountable at times. You just have to keep going at it every day. And there's definitely a lot of things that I suggest, like creating a really great resume and standing out in the interview process, creating a blog. There's a lot of really awesome engineers on Twitter that they're junior engineers and they've gotten jobs because they just started tweeting about their experience and how they're teaching themselves. And they started tweeting and creating blogs and getting on LinkedIn and promoting themselves until they got all these amazing offers. So it's definitely Ironically, the job market is less saturated now than when it was when I was looking 5 years ago, because that was
Everyone
when,
wants to start a tech company.
yes. And, definitely right now it's a very difficult time, but the good thing about that is it's easier to get a remote job because everyone's working remote, which I love.
Yeah, I love that too. I used to work in a company that they just said like, we don't care too much if you are here. If you don't want to come today, just tell us I don't want to come today, and you just work from your house. So that's a great thing. And there's some similarities between getting a job and also working for yourself. You talked about doing the job every day. Just keep pushing every single day.
Mhm.
And that's something that also works well anywhere. And it's amazing that you also said that let me paraphrase what you said. A faster way to get a job is like providing value up front, letting people know that you know what you're talking about. It's such an amazing thing that also works for building your own stuff and your own brand on Twitter, which is something that happened to you. You started tweeting about the things that you know. You started tweeting about how to get a high-paying job in tech, and amazingly, this month you gained 8,000 new followers just because you started providing free value up front to let people know what you know. So, would you say that for someone who is trying to get a job, it would be a good advice to start a blog and start tweeting and start posting about their journey online?
Yeah. I mean, when I started out and when I got my first developer job in 2 weeks, what I did is I treated my job search like it was my job. That was all I did for that 2 weeks, day after day. It was really tough and really exhausting, especially after a boot camp, because you're mentally drained after that experience. But just keeping up that, the little blocks every single day. And that's kind of what I did this month, where I just started blowing up on social media, was that every day I had this goal to myself that I was going to help one person, and I was going to post one high quality tweet that would help people. And suddenly, people started responding. And before that, I didn't like Twitter. I'm not a Twitter person. I was not a fan, but I kind of saw the value in it. Made me feel good, and it made other people feel good that I was reaching out to them, every day and trying to help as much as I can.
So when you were starting out, which specific steps did you take during those 2 weeks after you came out of the boot camp?
Yeah. So I think if you're a junior engineer and you're trying to get a job and you have no experience, it's really important to focus on your portfolio. So, you have no experience and you're approaching this company, it's kind of, it's an awkward thing and you don't feel like you're ready. But if you have a project you can take to that company, that's a huge thing. And if you can show them, oh, I did this, and that's kind of what I did, was one of the big steps, was that I took them actual projects and I was able to show them things that I'd actually worked on and done that I was proud of. And so that was like one of the main reasons. So it was a little easier to find a job for me, even though I didn't have experience. And then also reaching out to companies personally was a big, big help. If you're
What do you
shooting
mean
a resume,
personally, like an email, or did you actually call them?
no phones. Just kidding.
Okay.
Over email, I would find a company that I was really passionate or excited about, and I would just give them my pitch. I'm a junior developer and I'm looking for a job and I've built this and I love your company because of this reason. And that was actually something that my sister did when she was starting out. She reached out to a company and they'd gotten hundreds of resumes for this junior developer position, and she sent them a customized email and she was like, I will work as an intern. That's how much I love the company. And they were like, great. And then they ended up just hiring her as a full-time engineer after that.
Nice.
So that's another thing that really helps. And then also having a really great LinkedIn, just filling out everything and being active on there. That was actually how the company that hired me ended up finding me. They found my profile on LinkedIn and they reached out to me.
Okay, that's some great advice. So how would you proceed to get started with a portfolio? Because, I've tried to help a lot of, let's say, kids try to get started with the whole thing of making an online income. And they always tell me like, I want to learn web design because I'm mostly a web designer. But I don't know how to get clients. I don't have a portfolio. I don't have a website. I don't even have my own website. I'm not like putting my hand on the face like, man, you're selling web design and you don't even have your own website. That's not a good strategy. So how would you persuade someone to well, let me change the question. What would you tell someone to add to their portfolio if they don't have any experience with like companies, real companies?
Yeah, I would say first you have to start with a personal site, and you have to put that on your resume, and you have to make that look good. You have to spend a lot of time on that. You have to make it responsive. You have to, you have to have an about section. You have to have a portfolio section, and you have to include a way for them to also contact you. So that's kind of the first portfolio project that I would recommend.
Your own website.
Yes, that is, that's where you can kind of keep everything, and then you can start your blog on that as well. So that's kind of the first part. And then it depends kind of where you are in your process, but if you're a junior engineer, do a few tutorials, and then I would pick something and just start building that. I would pick just a tiny idea, and maybe it's not the next Facebook, the next Twitter. It could, be a little calculator application. It could be a to-do application, but something that, you can basically get done that you feel confident about. And then next, I would pick something that scares you a little bit, but at the same time, something that really excites you, so it keeps you passionate and keeps you going. And I get a lot of people that ask me like, I don't feel confident enough to do my own project, and that's fine. You can start for a portfolio project. You can do a tutorial, and you can build off of that first, and you can use what you've learned for the next application.
When I started with web design, the first site I created was, of course, my own, and then my dad's website. And then my godmother contacted me, and that was my first paid gig.
That's awesome.
My godmother paid me for the first website, like the first paid website. So I was actually impressed that I was getting paid to create something, even though I was a total noob. And then after a while, I met the person who is my wife now. And she like told her friends like that I also make websites, and I also got a job thanks to her insistence with her friends, and I also sold that, and that then became part of the portfolio, and then it just started growing, and it's such a when I think about that, I just say to myself, man, it's so easy. Yet we're always overcomplicating things because we're afraid of being judged, specifically on.
It's scary.
Yeah, even though, for example, tech is very open source and stuff like that, can also get a little bit, because programmers, I feel that they tend to be very opinionated, and no wonder they're talking about codes. It's either yes or no most of the time. So it's a funny thing seeing how human nature is. It's always the same, no matter the community. You have a side that's very opinionated, another side that's very like, oh, let's open up for everyone, and then they just start trashing each other. But it's so fun to see. But that said, what would you say for someone who is starting out and is a little bit afraid to start promoting their ideas and start blogging and start talking about their journey of learning? What would you say to them?
Oh, so I've been there. And I think, unfortunately, every engineer feels that. I've talked to the most senior engineers on the planet who have sold companies, who also had a CS degree, who worked as a manager.
What's a CS degree? Sorry.
Computer science.
Oh, okay, computer science.
Yes. And they still felt that fear. And I've had multiple engineers who I'm just so impressed with, and they've all told me they have that fear every day. And I kind of was, when I heard that, I was like, it was years ago, I was devastated. I was like, you're telling me I could get this high in my career and I would still feel so scared, because even as a senior engineer, I still have that fear. It comes back every once in a while. I'm a published O'Reilly author. I've spoken at conferences, but I still have that kind of, in the back of my head, you're not good enough. You can't be an engineer. Why are you here? And it kind of goes away a little bit the longer you work in the industry, but it never fades. And I think it's something you just get used to. And it's an unfortunate reality of working as an engineer that you're sometimes, frightened. But I would say that everyone feels that, and it's a horrible feeling, but you get used to it. You just
It never goes away. You just get used to it.
It gets a little, it's normalized at some point, but it's just, it's so important just to take that first step and write that first blog post. I mean, just earlier today, I had one of my friends, and we went to the same boot camp. We've been friends for 5-6 years now. And she's never written a blog post, and she's been nervous. And she told me, she's like, I read your blog post and I'm so inspired. I'm going to start my blog. And I've been telling her this for years. I'm like, you would provide such tremendous value, and you know so much, and you have so much empathy, but she never did it. And she was nervous. So it's just so important to just, get started.
Did she post the blog?
Not yet.
Man, that would be a great way to end that story. Like, and she did, and then she became a millionaire. Like, wow, nice.
Well, hey, it was a few hours ago, so.
Oh, okay. It's still like brewing. Okay. That's
Yes.
good to know. That's good to know. So, okay. So I post the blog and people start paying attention. And then the CEO of a great company that I've been like trying to get into sends me an email, or at least let's say someone that works there. And now I'm trembling because now I know that I have to persuade these people into buying my stuff, meaning my time for me to get hired. What's the first step, or the first couple of steps someone that's getting ready to go to a job interview must take?
So be calm, first of all. It's really important to, I've interviewed a lot of people where they just start sweating bullets. And it's really important, as hard as it is, just take deep breaths and be calm, and also prepare before the interview so you can feel that calm. So it's really important to work on your algorithms, unfortunately, and whatever kind of domain you're in. If you're a JavaScript engineer, you should go in with the JavaScript framework that you're comfortable with, or at least the fundamentals of JavaScript. And if you're an iOS engineer, you need to know Swift or Objective-C, and you need to have some experience there. And just kind of study for that every day. Like I said earlier, I treated my job search like it was my job. And as painful as algorithms are to sit there and work on every day, if you really create a schedule for yourself, it's not that bad, and it's not that overwhelming. And so for me, I started at like 9 a.m. every day, and I went to 6 p.m. and I would spend a few hours just prepping on questions and building my portfolio and my projects out. And then after that, I would reach out to companies every day, no matter what. And I wouldn't just be blindly sending out resumes, but it's so important to stick to that schedule of the interview prep. And there's so many amazing resources out there. I actually have a list in my new book coming out, just like free interview processes that they'll take you through. And these are, engineers that have worked at like Facebook and Google, and they'll help prep you. For me, I also do flashcards. That's a big thing. And I just hand it to a friend who might not even be an engineer, and I have them ask me those questions. It's another way I like to prepare. And I also, it's silly, but I buy a whiteboard and I put it on the wall and I write it out, because it's really important to get that muscle memory in and just kind of desensitize yourself to the nerves.
Yeah, that's the hard part for many people. But when you're prepared, it just make it so much easier. And at the end of the day, when you're being interviewed for a job in tech specifically, you're usually being interviewed by someone who understands that most people come in nervous. And they usually try to calm you down if they see you a little bit nervous. At least that's what I perceived. That said, I read a funny story on Twitter that you posted about a time that you were interviewing someone. I guess you know what I'm going to talk about. You were interviewing this guy, and this guy asks you out. That caught my attention. Tell me a little bit about that. What like, I don't understand how someone can like ask someone out on an interview, but you tell me the story.
That was really funny. That completely, I had no idea that would blow up as much as it did. I was like, oh, it's just a funny thing that happened to me once. I'll share it on Twitter randomly. And it completely exploded. It went viral. So I was actually interviewing the person. I wasn't even, the one who was being interviewed. I was the interviewer. And, sitting in a JavaScript interview, and it was pretty early on in my career. I think I was an engineer for 2 years at that point. And I was asking him JavaScript questions and just seeing if he would be a good fit. And suddenly he was like, well, what are you doing later? I was like, excuse me? Sorry, what was that? And I was like, do you mean at my job? And I was like, oh, I'd love to talk you through the day-to-day of an engineer here. And he's like, no, I mean you personally. Like, are you available later tonight? And I was just like, I think I just blanked for 2 minutes. There was just like silence. I was like, did this just happen to me? I was
Did you hire him?
We did not hire him. I actually did not realize there's a whole protocol for when that happens. And the story eventually got to HR. I didn't
Oh,
really
because when that happens, it sounds like it's something that happens regularly.
Apparently it does. It never happened to me. But HR called me in one day and I was really worried. I was like, did I do something? Like, am I getting fired? I was still, only 2 years in my career at that point. And they said, well, we just wanted to let you know that was not okay that happened. Are you okay? They were really, really kind about it. And then at the end, they said, and if that happens again, you need to walk out immediately and come talk to us. And I was like, what do you mean if that happens again? Like, ideally, that never happens again.
So to our listeners, never ask out the person who is interviewing you.
Yes.
That's some actionable advice right there. We should have started a podcast with that tip. Never ask out the person who is interviewing you unless you want to get thrown out of the building with your handcuffed and then thrown into jail. So you mentioned that you're writing a book specifically to help people get a job. And you actually told me about that you launched it today to your email list. So could you go through some of the things that you're going to talk about in that book, or that you're already talking in that book?
Yeah, I'd love to. So it's kind of everything that I wish I knew, and I was just starting out. And even now, there's a lot of things that I think when you start out as an engineer that no one tells you. And I was lucky enough that I have a really great mom, and she kind of knows a lot of these different things about building an engineering brand and standing out. And
She's also an engineer?
She's not an engineer.
Oh, okay.
Have her own business though. So she kind of helped me learn a lot of these things, and then I learned a lot of these on my journey. So in my book talks a lot about just preparing for the interview process and staying calm and how you can prepare yourself well. And then everything about creating an engineering brand. I'm going to walk everyone through creating your first blog post and getting an audience and posting, to Medium or posting to Free Code Camp or posting to Dev, etc. And just kind of everything that I had wished someone had told me when I started out, and all about the interview process, the technical interview process, the culture fit, negotiation, kind of the skills you need. It's going to be everything I wish I had known.
That's good to know. And for someone who, for example, doesn't live in the United States, is that something that also might help them, like to get a job in tech in the United States?
Definitely. Absolutely.
Okay. That's good to know, because some of my listeners are from outside of the States. And even if you don't get a job in the United States, you can use those tactics, I believe, outside of inside your country. So that's a good thing. So there's something that I wanted to talk about with you, and it's about providing value on Twitter. Because you just told me, like, I didn't like Twitter. I didn't like what happens on Twitter, because, Twitter is sometimes a dumpster fire. But now you found a way to actually use Twitter in a way that is not common, meaning that you find a way to provide value and teach people how to do what you do. So for someone who is starting out, also to get a job or whatever, how could they use Twitter or social media in general to land that first job or to find a new job?
Yeah, so all about making connections and providing value. I think especially for a junior engineer, just connecting with other engineers that might help you find a job. Like, I see a lot of junior engineers just posting, for instance, a job search tweet. Mm-hmm. And I've done that before, and I got hundreds of replies, which were so helpful to me, and then also other people that were looking at the tweet. So I think if you're a junior engineer, just writing that once a week, really compelling tweet that I'm looking for this job, these are my skills, and something that makes people, remember you and makes you stand out. And whenever I see one of those tweets, I immediately send them a list of like the companies I know that are hiring junior engineers. So that really works.
It's good to hear it, because even though most people like understand that that's how you're supposed to use social media to get a job, it's still good to refresh people's minds. It's, for example, I usually tweet the same tweet but with different words, just to remind people about, hey, you need to develop your self-discipline. I'm very much into that topic in self-development, for example. And
I love your tweets.
oh, thank you. I love my tweets too. If I didn't love it, I wouldn't publish it. But when I started, let me tell you a story. When I started writing for Twitter around 2 years ago, since English is not my first language, I used to write all my tweets in Spanish and then translated them into English using Google Translate. So I had to do the job twice. I posted a tweet in Spanish on Facebook, which is mostly people that I follow, my friends from here, from Dominican Republic, and on LinkedIn. And then I used the English version for Twitter. So I actually worked twice to write a tweet. Well, it was painful. And at the beginning, I was feeling a little bit scared of posting the tweets, until this guy I met on Twitter told me, like, if you hadn't told me that English was not your first language, I wouldn't have even noticed. That tweet alone changed like my whole self-perception of how I write stuff in English. And I've told him many times that tweet changed my life. Amazingly, a tweet, which you could say you're used to hearing out that a tweet changed your life, but in a bad way. You got canceled by the whatever culture, that thing that happened on Twitter. But that tweet changed my life in a positive way. People underestimate the goodness people have inside. They underestimate how much people want to see you win, even strangers. He was a stranger back then. Then we started following each other after he posted that on that tweet, under my tweet. And we became like friends. I haven't visited him, but we talked about, and we hopped into different, this kind of mediums, just to talk about business or whatever. So people underestimate how a lot of people just want to help you out by retweeting or liking your post, or sharing your ideas with other people. Like you, when I see someone like posting their products or their services, I retweet them. Because I want to see them win. Sometimes, even if I don't know who that person is, which is a risk, I don't suggest you do it. I sometimes retweet that, just because I was given so much by social media that why wouldn't I give, like you said, give away a little bit of that goodness that I've received. And that's how I've tried to build my brand around mostly positivity. Of course, from time to time, it's Twitter. So there's no way you can avoid losing your cool from time to time on Twitter, but that's okay. But I've received so much from this medium, even though it's sometimes toxic, that I just find that if I give more than what I receive, I will keep receiving more. And,
I love that. I was just thinking that.
Tell me.
I love that. No, that's such a profound story. And I've noticed the same thing, that a lot of on Twitter, it is painful to read. And, a lot of things are very hurtful, and people, love to, jump on the anger. But there is a lot of people like you, you've been promoting my work, and now I'm on your podcast. So there are these relationships that, can form, that are just so amazing. Like, last month I was basically a nobody on Twitter, and I wasn't tweeting regularly. And I started following a bunch of people just randomly one day when I wanted to start helping more people. And one of them was Daniel Basallo, who you interviewed recently, and started kind of listening to just more of the positivity on Twitter. And it was so helpful to me, because I thought, okay, all these people are doing it. I want to see how much I can help. And just with messages like that, that's when everything started blowing up. I'm doing 3 podcasts. So this is actually my first podcast ever.
Oh, really?
Today.
You've done a great job.
Oh, thank you. I'll feel much better later night when I cry into my pillow if I messed up.
I'll send you the link after we end the call, so you can approve everything. Although I can tell you, it's been quite funny. It has been like one of the
Oh,
most
thank you.
engaging podcasts I've recorded.
Thank you so much for saying that. But yeah, it's actually my first one, and now I have a few coming up in the next week, and I'm speaking at an online conference. And so kind of all these things have just come together because I started giving more of myself, and I'm not sure if you noticed that, but I reviewed hundreds of resumes this week. I think we talked about it a little bit. In the last few weeks, I've just gotten so many
Just
resumes.
out of the goodness of your heart, like, hey, send it to me, I'll review it for you.
Yes.
How did you find the
did.
time?
Oh my gosh. So it was a lot of weekends and nights, and I still have to work my day job.
Mm-hmm.
So I got so many, I had to close the list briefly because I was like, this is not going to be fair. People are going to have to wait. So that was just something that was so powerful. And then I met so many new amazing people. So I'm just such a big fan of Twitter now. People like you and like Daniel that have helped me in such a profound way to help other people.
That's also a great way to provide value, that giving away your time, let's say for free to help others. Of course it's not free, because at the end of the day, if you're not doing something for you, you're doing something for someone else. But just seeing how others start to win because of your advice and your guidance, it's worth more than getting paid most of the time.
Absolutely.
I realized that the more, even though it's not related too much to what we're talking about, but the more like my income has been growing, the more time I find myself providing more free value to people, which is something I did not expect. Because when I started Twitter, I wanted to make an income with Twitter. It was one of the main goals. And then it happened, and then I'm like, okay, I now have the extra income. What now? It's I don't want to be known as the guy that's just making money with Twitter. So I said to myself, I need to start providing more value and giving people what they deserve. So I actually noticed that the more I give, the more I want to give. Even though I'm talking about like free stuff. Here's a blog post, here's an email, here's a free product that I don't even use to sell more stuff outside of that, which is something that not many marketers do. They tell you, subscribe to my list, and then you start harassing you with offers. I don't do that because I found so much value in my audience that I just realized that it works more for my own, let's call it mental health, and for other people, that just give more that when you receive, and you will receive even more that what you're asking for.
I love that. I'm a huge fan of that. Last year I created a free guide. It was about 50 to 60 pages that I had spent months working on. And it was just basically how to become an engineer from nothing. And, what the job is like, what kind of the websites you can look into, how you can start using Git. And I had originally, had started it because so many people had reached out to me for help. And I didn't know of any great free resource that was had everything in it that I wanted to share with them. So I found myself writing these very long emails of like, here's the website, here's how you use Git. And after a while of doing that, I just thought, okay, I'm going to create a guide. And so I did that and gave it away free. And then in the first month, I had 1,000 email subscribers just for that one. And it blew up, and it felt so good to have helped that many people. So like recently I had one of my resources in my book is about around 50 to 60 places where you can look for a job, and then also hidden places you wouldn't think about, like maybe a Slack community or a Discord or even Twitter. And that was originally something in my book, my book that is paid for. It is not free. And I had so many people reaching out to me asking me about it that I thought, I'm going to give this list away for free. And it came across, for me, it just felt so good because it was so powerful and so many people had gotten so much value for it. And I'm actually in one of these Slack communities, a Women in Tech Slack group, and they posted my resource, and a bunch of people started talking about it without knowing I was, also in the Slack group. And it felt amazing. It was such a good feeling. So I'm just such a big fan of just giving back as much as you can and just seeing where that takes you. And, that is more valuable than anything else.
And people underestimate the power of free. and the power of just showing off what you know. You don't have to be like the best at something to talk about the things that you love to do. You don't have to be the best programmer to talk about how to learn to code. You don't have to be the best designer to teach others how to design. You don't have to be the best at anything to teach people how to do something. So,
I love
for
that.
example, in sports, you see it all over the place. You see these coaches that weren't the best basketball players, for example, but they are regarded as really great coaches. You don't have to be the best player to be a great coach or a great teacher or someone that provides value. And it's something that took me a lot of years to realize. I remember the first book I tried to write. It was a book about HTML and CSS, and that book never saw the light.
Oh no.
And it will never see the light. But because I stopped liking writing that book because I overcomplicated the process. I thought to myself, okay, this book needs to be perfect. And then I started rewriting every single sentence 10 times. And then I started just wasting my time in the layout on making it look pretty and making it look better, changing the colors, changing the font size, which is like the last thing that I do to the age. Because I realized it's not about creating the perfect product. It's about teaching people how to do what you're doing the way that you do it. And the way that you do it will never be perfect. It will never be perfect because there's no such thing as perfection in the human experience. So when I advise people in my private consultations and mentorship on what to do when they want to launch a new course or a new book or just start a consulting service, let's call it like that, I tell them it's not about using the perfect words. It's about letting people understand that you have their best interest and that you actually want to help them, that the money that they're paying, at the end of the day, that you need to make them feel that they actually that you are undercharging. That's the goal. You need to make people feel that you're undercharging, and you do that by listening, by providing the value, by being there, by over promising, which is something that not many people do, and on top of over promising, over delivering. What do I mean with over promising? It's not about the perfection. It's about doing the best you can at the top of your abilities. That's when you overpromise. And people don't realize the power of just letting people know that you have their back.
I love that.
They underestimate that. And you don't have to be the best for that. So that said, tell me.
I think that some people are scared to get started. I mean, years ago when I was starting my first blog, we were forced to do it in the boot camp, and I would have never done that otherwise, because I was like, who would ever want to read my blog post? And, who would ever get value out of that? And then, years later, I deleted the blog posts. My early on ones are gone, thankfully. But I had a ton of people reach out to me, and they were like, hey.
Why? You deleted?
Well, they were like, I attended that bootcamp because of you. And I read, those blogs because they were so impactful to me. And I realized how true that was. Even when I was looking for a bootcamp to attend, I was reading these blog posts from, junior engineers that were in the process of the bootcamp. And I would read them day after day to get inspiration. And I don't think these people really ever knew. So years later, I reached out to them and I was like, hi, you didn't know at the time, but, you impacted my entire life. So you just never know, what you have to share with people. It's just so important to just get your voice out there and start being heard.
I just find myself reflected on what you're saying, because as I told you, I also came from the tech part. I graduated from graphic design, but I never design too much. I went more for the web design, which is also design, but it's so different. It's not the same thing as designing a flyer or a logo. It's so much different. And I still have some friends that are struggling to get their jobs and struggling to promote themselves because they tell me that they just don't feel comfortable promoting their stuff and promoting their ideas because there are other people outside that they feel are better than them. Like, no kidding. Of course, there will always be someone that's better than you, but there will always be someone that can learn from you.
Yes,
And
I totally agree with that. There's always someone
thankfully, I realized that.
younger, smarter. I totally agree with that. There's always going to be someone out there, but that's kind of, I had to realize that same thing. I was like, what, years ago, I didn't really think I had any value to provide. In the last year, people started asking me like, hey, you got your first dev job in 2 weeks? That's insane. And I was like, no, it's not insane. Maybe I was just lucky. And I kind of negated all like the hard work that went into it. But after, more and more people reached out to me, I started realizing that, I'm not the best engineer in the world. I didn't create, React. I'm not contributing to open source every single day. But I had, something that people, wanted to hear. So I totally agree with you. It's just so important.
So important to start like showcasing your journey and just letting people know that you're doing something. There's power behind letting people know what you're doing. How many let me ask you this question. How many of your friends you don't even know what they do in their life? How many acquaintances you don't even know what they do? You just know who they are, but you don't know what they sell or where they work or whatever, or what's their passion. Just because they don't feel like maybe comfortable talking about that. But everyone who knows me, for example, knows that I started out with web design and that I create websites. And now every person that meets me, also I tell them, hey, follow me on Twitter. I don't care if they have Twitter or no. I tell them because there's power behind letting people know what you do. There's so much power.
That's one of the things I discuss in my book.
Mm-hmm.
Before I kind of had created an engineering brand for myself, before I was speaking at conferences and meetups and writing blog posts, and I was kind of just focusing on being a good engineer. And I really thought it's silly, but I thought, the really best engineers, they're not out there on Twitter. They're not writing blog posts. They're just coding every single day. And that was kind of my life for years. And it wasn't until I started, getting on blog posts and writing all the time and going to speak at conferences and meetups and just networking more that I realized that's how companies find you. And then everything for me started changing. I have Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, all the big tech companies, Apple reaching out constantly. I don't even have time to respond to those emails anymore. And I have the same skills, that I had, 2 years ago. I mean, hopefully a little better than 2 years ago.
Yeah, but I understand what you're saying.
But I'm the same person, but just because I created a little more of a brand and I became a published author with, an amazing tech publisher, that all these companies, they reach out to me now. So I don't have to apply for jobs anymore. I have them reach out to me.
That's power. That's power. And social media has opened up that, let's say, power for people that don't have the huge brand or the huge influence or that kind of power within their company. Social media has destroyed basically any kind of, let's call it, gatekeeper. And still people don't realize how much easier it is to get published, to self-publish, to talk about their ideas. And it's just based on fear. They fear of being judged. They fear of being doing it badly. They feel of failing in front of everyone. And as you said, the fear will never go away. It's there. It's there. Yeah. Every time I record something in English, I'm always like, oh, today I'm going to stutter. I will be too hard for people to understand my accent, which is, I totally understand that people get me, but it's still there. I still struggle with that little void inside of me telling me like, hey, Jose, your English suck. People don't understand your accent, but they do. But it never goes away. So what you do is like circumvent that little voice and just keep moving forward. So to end this podcast on a high note, Randall, what would you say to anyone who is starting out, trying to find a job or trying to build a brand or just trying to provide value to the world?
Gosh, yeah, I would say, first of all, you have to start with just small efforts every day. A few months ago, I was nobody on Twitter, didn't have, any self-published books coming out. And I just started, for a half hour every day, I started doing a little bit. I started doing a little bit of writing, a little bit of tweeting. And I thought to myself, I can't publish a book. I can't self-publish a book. and I can't create a product and no one's going to want to follow me on Twitter. But because I just put in that little bit of effort every single day, I got a little bit better and a few more people heard me. So I think it's so important to just hang in there and keep going at it. And I mean, really, if you never give up, you will get to your goals.
That's beautiful. I wanted to thank you for saying yes to this conversation. Hopefully
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully you invite me to your podcast when you decide on opening, and I could be like the first guest or whatever.
Oh, yes.
That aside, thank you so much for saying yes. I love this conversation. I guess that a lot of people will find value. Hopefully they reach out to you and tell you, hey, I heard you in Jose's podcast. I got a job 2 weeks after I heard it because I followed through and I purchased your book and I just put that into practice and now I have a new job. So where can people find you, Randall?
Yes, so I have my own website, randallkanna.com, and I'm also on Twitter with Randall Kanna.
Okay, I will add those links in the description. So Randall, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to meet you, at least in this virtual medium. And
thank you for having me.
Of course. Hopefully we can have another call later in the future to teach people how to do more stuff. So thank you so much. And hopefully people find a lot of value in this podcast. So see you soon. Bye.
Bye.